Thanks for listening to In Studio from Simply Timeless. I'm your host, Jay Daniels. This week, we're continuing our talks about family as we visit with trombonist Steve Turre and his daughter Andromeda. Steve has been well known for his work with Ray Charles, Art Blakey, and the Saturday Night Live Band. His daughter Andromeda is continuing that musical legacy as a talented vocalist. She also spent time with Ray Charles as one of the last Raelettes. You'll hear stories from the road, but first let's start with Steve's birthplace in the Midwest.
Well, I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, but I don't know one thing about Nebraska. My father was going to Creighton University on the GI Bill when I was born. And after he graduated, they moved back to California, and I was 1 year old. So I don't remember anything from being 1 year old. And I grew up in Lafayette, California.
And where in California is Lafayette?
It's in the Bay Area, about not quite 10 miles east of Oakland in the hills. When I grew up, it was a small town with about a 3-block strip with gas stations, a hamburger joint, a grocery store, a little tiny movie theater. My mom used to give us a quarter on Saturday. Me and my brother would go watch a movie, cartoons, a Three Stooges, and a Western for 25 cents.
That's incredible.
30 cents each and get rid of us for the afternoon. And she'd have a little breathing room and we go have a good time. And with that extra 10 cents, we could buy a candy bar, whatever, popcorn or, it's just a little town. By the time I graduated from high school, it had totally turned into suburbs. When I was little, it was pear and walnut orchards. By the time I was out of high school, all those trees were gone and it was houses. And
what I think is always so interesting and cool about our family is that your parents, my grandparents, met at a Count Basie concert.
Yeah, that's right.
They were super into big band jazz.
I take it then that music, Steve, was pretty much a mainstay in your family then.
My mom plays piano. She used to dance flamenco and traditional Mexican dances. And my dad played the record player. He wasn't a performer in any way, but he was a great listener and he loved to listen to music. And I think he had every Frank Sinatra record ever made and all kind of big band records. And he also had some symphonic records. He introduced me to the Rites of Spring by Stravinsky. He had a good ear. And he took me when I was in 4th grade, about 9 years old, is when I first started playing trombone. And my parents took my older brother and myself to see Duke Ellington at the Oakland Auditorium. And then after that, we saw Count Basie's band, the real band with Count Basie, not the ghost band. We saw Les Brown, we saw Stan Kenton, Woody Herman. I saw all the great big bands. Well, not all of them, but most of them.
When you went with Uncle Mike, was he playing saxophone at the time? Did you guys start playing at the same time?
He started before me.
He started before you.
You got to be in the 4th grade playing the band. So he started in the 4th grade. He played alto sax and clarinet. I wanted to play in the band too. Said, no, you got to wait till your 4th grade. So when I was in 4th grade, I went to the band room and I said, I want to play in the band. The bandmaster, he said, well, what instrument do you play? I said, I don't know. He said, well, pick an instrument. And there were these big posters on the wall. One was the orchestra. And they had all the strings, the bass, the cello, the viola, the violins. It had, the tuba, the trombone, the French horn, the trumpet, and all the percussion. The bass drum is a separate thing, the snare drum, the cymbals, and the woodwinds, And then the other poster was a marching band with rows of instruments. And what's in the front row of the marching band because of the slide? the trombone.
76 trombones on the hit parade.
Somebody likes the Music Man.
Yeah.
I saw that trombone in the front row. I said, I'll try that one. It just caught my eye. Don't ask me why I picked the trombone, because I don't know. I just liked the way it looked, I guess. But I had a knack for it. I learned the song my first day, and it was called Sweet Sue, Just You. I actually learned it by ear. I could play by ear very early. Of course, I was learning to read, but I could pick something up quicker by hearing it by ear than by reading it. And, there I played in the school bands, and then in high school, I played in the jazz band and in the concert band. And then they also did a few musical, and we did do the Music Man in high school. That's one, and I think the other was Brigatoon or something. But the Music Man had good trombone parts. It was fun to play. And I also used to like to play the Sousa marches. I'm going to just make a statement. I do not like marching band. Marching band is like military music, which is like for war, for killing and stuff, for football, like a war, And in high school, you couldn't play in the jazz band or the concert band unless you played in the marching band. And so I did it 1 year as a freshman, and I didn't like it. You got to get up at 7 a.m. before school starts. You got to be on the field at 7 a.m. And it's so cold in the winter that the mouthpieces stick to your lip. It could freeze on your lip and all that. Oh, man, that's why they come out with those plastic mouthpieces, but they didn't have that when I was a kid. And anyway, I got out of it after my freshman year by playing football. So I played on the varsity team, and that got me out of marching band.
All this time you're hearing the sounds of not only the brass, but the woodwinds, but especially the jazz music, which has become your mainstay for so many years. What was it, maybe at that point, I don't know if you necessarily had a deep connection with jazz, but what were the things about that genre of music that connected most with you?
The rhythm. I'm attracted to rhythmic music. I like to feel the music. For me, it's more of a spiritual and physical thing than it is a mental thing. But the mental thing is there too, of course. It's not complete without that. But music that's just heady and doesn't have any heart and soul, it's okay, but it doesn't attract me the way the rhythmic music attracts me. And jazz is definitely more rhythmic than orchestral.
You mentioned your older brother was also in band, and I believe you said your mother played piano. Did you get to, experience music together with your family in that way? Were you able to play together with them, I suppose, is my question.
No, my older brother and I played together. In fact, we had a little band starting in middle school. I did my first gigs about 13. And we would play for little dances or parties or at the Elks Club or the American Legion Hall or whatever little gig we could get. And then in high school, I started playing electric bass, and I played in a funk rock band. And we used to do covers of James Brown tune or the Beatles tune or whatever else was popular. We wrote a few of our own songs too. And that group was called Shades Blue, I believe. I played bass, drums, 2 guitars, and a saxophone. And we used to do honky tonk too. I remember that one. The saxophone player would play that one, Bill Dogger.
Yes, parts 1 and 2 on that song. That's a wonderful piece, yeah.
That was really cool. I like that one. So I started playing the blues really early on, and jazz is based on the blues. I've always been a night person. I always had a hard time. They didn't want you to go to bed at 8, 9 o'clock at the latest to get up for school. And I never really could fall right asleep at 8 o'clock. My body clock has just been more on the later side. So I got what they call a crystal radio. It's a little kit, and I put it together, and then I run a wire between two trees in the backyard, and you connect it, and you don't need batteries, you don't need to plug it in. It's not loud, but you have these little headphones, and you turn this little dial, and there's no numbers on, like you know what station you're getting. You just turn it until you hear something. So I used to lay in bed and turn this dial, and I'd listen to all kind of music, jazz music, if it come on, gospel music, black gospel music, the original gospel music, country music, blues, orchestra, whatever I could turn it down, fine, I just listen. But, and then you fall asleep listening to music, it seeps into you, and that was really cool. But so I listened to all kind of things, just it gets to you, you learn that way too. I learn by listening. And when I listen, I've learned how to listen. And a lot of people should understand how to listen, especially to jazz, because you can just follow the bass or just follow the piano or follow the drums or follow the singer or follow the horn player and see what they're doing in relation to everything else. And it gives you a fuller picture of the sound and of all the components that go into producing that sound. And since it's spontaneous music, it's like instant composition. And the contributions of each person to that total picture, how they all fit together to make the picture, is a beautiful thing. And so it's hard to do that these days, but I used to just listen to records, no talking. People, you just sit there. I go with friends that were musicians, and we go listen to the latest record. And we'd listen to it. We wouldn't talk. We'd listen. I think since MTV, those days are gone.
Not only were you able to take the musical gifts that you were given through your own family, but you've also been able to share those with your own children in the years since, especially your daughter Andromeda. Tell us, I suppose my question would be, how did you come to start your own family? What was that like for you?
Just kind of happened. It wasn't something I was seeking or something that I had planned. It just kind of happened. Actually, I had been married before when I was 21. And we didn't have any children, and we didn't have any assets at all, nothing. And it turned out that being married to a musician isn't for everybody. It's not only that you travel, but you have to practice every day. Until recently, I have to take every gig that comes along that's not an insult to pay the bills. It's like that old ad that say, you're only as good as your last performance. You have to constantly live the music to keep your level at a certain place. And so anyway, that first thing, I was married a year, it just dissolved it, irreconcilable differences, boom, finished. And then I went on the road with Ray Charles. Incidentally, not only did I play with Ray Charles, my younger brother played with Ray Charles for 18 years up until Ray passed. And then Andromeda. So we have three of us all went through Ray's band. And what an education, man. And nobody got more soul than Ray. Oh, man, everything he does is like bam, And I just found a video that my younger brother, Pete, who played with Ray, said, man, I just found a video on YouTube of you playing with Ray. It's Ray Charles of Copenhagen. And you got a solo on the first tune. I said, wow. And I went and checked it out. And it was really great to watch. It brought back so many memories. I was young and 23. But, anyway, after Ray, I went back after the tour. The season for Ray started just after New Year's. He takes off 2 weeks before Christmas. He goes back in March. So he's got 3 months off. And the rest of the time, nonstop. He had his own airplane, his own tour bus, his own recording studio, his own record label, his own management agency, his own booking agent. He was way ahead of the curve with everybody. He owned his own masters. And I left in March and got back December, the following December. And I was in the Bay Area. And while I was gone, a great trumpet player named Woody Shaw had moved to San Francisco. And I knew of him because he was on the Horace Silver record, Cape Verdean Blues, and J.J. Johnson is on that record. So I had the record to hear J.J., and then I heard Wood. I said, oh, man. So I went to see him, and we became friends. And he introduced me to Art Blakey. And Art Blakey asked me to join the band after I sat in. And that's when I came to New York, to the East Coast to live. But it's interesting. Only 2 gigs in my life I've auditioned for, and they've been good ones. One was Ray Charles, and the other was Saturday Night Live. All the other gigs, Art Blakey, Woody Shaw, McCoy Tyner, Dizzy Gillespie, Hugh Masekela, all these different people I played with, I got from sitting in. I came to New York, and I played a short while with Art, but he wasn't working. Everybody has ups and downs in their career, and he wasn't working a lot. He was working, but the trombone was the extra horn. I always make a joke that the trombone is the last to be hired and the first to be fired in terms of horns. In jazz, they have a trumpet and a saxophone. That's the primary band. And if it's just one horn, it's a saxophone. And they have a trumpet. The trombone is the extra horn. So I'd do some gigs, but then I got offered to go with the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra. And I went with them. I was subbing on Thad and Mel for a European tour, and for a West Coast tour, we did the Monterey Jazz Festival and all that. And interesting, in connection, bringing back a memory, we played out on the West Coast. And my father and my mom are big band people. Now, Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, that's the greatest big band I ever played with. Unbelievable. His writing, the voices, everything. John Faddis was playing first trumpet. And I knew him from the Bay Area before. He's the one who kind of introduced me to Thad. I sat in and he said, okay, we need somebody. Can you make it? I invited my parents to come to the concert in California. And, my mom always encouraged my music. My dad encouraged my music until he realized I wanted to make it a career. Then he said, well, you can't make any money playing music. Why don't you be a doctor, a lawyer, or something like that where you can make a good living? I said, man, I got to do this, So he didn't discourage me, but he wasn't encouragement or supportive necessarily for that reason. Although he enjoyed the music, he'd come to see me play. But when he heard me playing with Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra, he said, I understand why you have to do this. Yeah. And he gave me his blessing, so to speak. And that really felt good. So anyway, after Thad and Mel's tour, I came back and I ended up joining Chico Hamilton's band. And Arthur Blythe was playing saxophone and Rodney Jones on the guitar. It's a great band. Arnie Lawrence also played for a while, and Barry Finnerty on the guitar. And I started out for 1 week on the trombone. And then the bass player left without telling Chico. He just left him hanging. He went on another gig that paid more. And Chico called me in a panic. Man, do you know any bass players? We need a bass player for the weekend. Yeah, I called everybody. Nobody was available that I knew. And so I told him, well, I play bass and I know the tunes already. So I'll cover until you get someone. Well, it turned out he liked the way I played bass. So he said, well, look, you play bass, I'll give you a raise. He almost paid me double. But he wasn't paying that much. That's why the bass player left to go with somebody else. But anyway, you could play trombone too. What that meant was play trombone once a night. He wanted to take a break. He said, play a ballad with the guitar. And he went to bar and get a drink. And I did a tune. So one tune a night. After 2 years of that, that was enough. But during the time with Chico Hamilton, that's when I met Akua. And she was working out in Brooklyn at the New Muse. It was an educational thing. And I went out there and they had a big band too. And I played a little in the band and talked to the kids some. And I gave her a ride home. And then that's how we ended up getting to know each other. And one thing led to another. And we ended up getting married. Next thing you know, we had a family. And Andromeda came. And she always could sing. She always had good pitch. I remember I wrote this tune, and it's kind of a little complicated, called Fire and Ice. It's got a line that's got some intervals in it. And she just come and started singing it with me one day when I was playing it at the piano. I said, oh, man, So, I knew
How old was I?
What, 8, 10, something like that. You weren't a little tiny girl, but you wasn't in middle school yet.
Yeah, it's so interesting because even now, if I put on your Fire and Ice album or the Right There album or the Viewpoint album, I can still sing along with almost every solo on the entire album. I can sing the bass lines and like a lot of times because I heard it so much when I was growing up and was there for all the rehearsals and stuff and I realized that a couple of years ago I was listening to something and I like calculated the math and I was like, how old was I? Like, why do I know this? How old was I when you were doing this music? And it was sort of shocking to me that I was able to even absorb it at that age. Now, like having kids and trying to get them to understand music, I mean, like that's crazy.
And once it's in your head, it doesn't often, leave. It's an amazing thing. Andromeda, were you always a vocal child? I mean, Steve was mentioning how you would sing along with these numbers. Were you always what you would think of as vocal, or were you someone who took a while to begin singing?
I was actually starting off as a dancer. I used to do ballet and my parents would have rehearsals in the living room and I would dance around. And that was what, like my dad was saying before, he's attracted to rhythmic music, right? And so the rhythm made me want to dance. That's what I heard in the house when I was growing up. And so that was my first creative expression and response to the music was through dance. But I would always sing along with the melodies because I heard them. And even with my mom's string quartet, string quartets spend an incredible amount of time rehearsing the same repertoire in order to get it to really lock. And when you're standing there dancing around in circles, hearing the same thing over and over and over again, you get it in your head. And these melodies, I would sing them in my head and I would sing them skipping down the block. And I started getting more into singing when I was in high school. I joined the choir. We had a madrigals choir. Unlike my dad, I didn't mind getting up at the crack of dawn to go to rehearsal. It was also before school started. It was called 0 period. So it was before school and I had to get up when it was still dark to go there. But I will say that it was indoors and not outdoors and I was not playing a cold trombone. So fair enough.
Yeah. But when you were just getting up to go to school, Dad was just finishing a gig from the night before, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. Give him a high five on the way out the door.
There you go.
I do actually remember a couple of times when I didn't want to get up for something and Dad, you woke me up with the conch shells. And so That is an interesting childhood memory that I have, and I still always think it's so cool when I see you play the shells. But it still always reminds me of not wanting to wake up for school in the morning sometimes. But I did the Madrigals Choir, which was all a cappella, and so that also was really good for working on pitch and interval training and that kind of stuff. And we did a lot of sight reading for that music. And I joined the jazz choir, and I did a lot of musical theater as well when I was in high school. That's when I really started getting into it. But I also played piano when I was younger. I started on piano when I was very, very young, and writing my own songs and making up my own songs on the piano from an incredibly young age. Before I really thought of myself as a singer, it was dance and piano. I still play piano.
Do you play piano and sing at the same time, or are they separate for you?
Separate. I have a really hard time playing and singing at the same time, but I use it as a tool for composition and arranging. So I'm really glad that I had the foundation and took the lessons and sort of took it seriously when I was younger, even though I would never hire myself out as a piano player. It has been an incredible tool as a vocalist to have access to.
On Instagram, you have a daily series of photographs that come out highlighting other jazz artists. I believe you call it Growing Up Jazz. Is that right? So if I can go off of that title for a moment, and I want to dig at this idea of a musical family. How would you describe growing up in a family where your parents were primarily involved with music? How would you describe being in that environment?
I mean, I don't know any other kind of life, so I don't really have anything to compare it to. For me, it was completely normal. For me, I loved it. I loved it when there were rehearsals happening. I loved it when my parents had concerts, and it was like I get to go and sit backstage, and sometimes I would be playing at a bar or something, or where I couldn't sit in the audience because I was too young, but I would like sneak through the curtains in the back and just watch them on stage. And going on tour, like a lot of kids go to summer camp, I went on tour with my parents. I know a couple of years, Dad, you were with Dizzy Gillespie, Lester Bowie, and I got to go. And it was always normal, but so much fun. And so growing up, jazz was just a lifestyle for me that I'm very blessed to have experienced. But it was also a learning experience, not just the osmosis of internalizing this incredible body of music. My mom was pregnant with me when she was playing in Max Roach's band. And so when they were rehearsing to go on tour with the double quartet, I was a brand new baby, and Max would come to our house for rehearsals because my mom had a newborn at home. And so I have pictures of myself with Max Roach at that time, and just growing up, having access to these musicians that helped define this genre of music, and talking to them about things outside of music. A lot of them were very involved in civil rights, or, Dizzy ran for president. There was all of this beautiful, rich history of how jazz was ingrained into American history and American society that was always really interesting to me. And just seeing the extended possibilities and influence of jazz was something that I always thought was really cool.
And both you and your dad had a great blessing, and that is the fact that you were able to share this love of music together. You've been able to also perform together on several occasions. How have those moments been a blessing to both of you?
Well, there's nothing more familiar than family. So, everybody knows everybody like that. When we play together, it's just like having a conversation. One thing that I remember in particular is we all played together in Russia.
Tomsk, yeah. And Mulgrew was there too.
He was there, but it was cool. And Orion,
my brother.
He played drums. And so it was fun. I remember that one. And then I've done gigs with Andromeda, and she's done gigs with me all through the years, Ryan, my son, plays in my band now. He's my drummer. Aku's on a whole lot of my records. So, we've all played together in various settings.
I have a lot of fun trading with my dad when we play together and we're improvising because, like he said, there's nothing more familiar with family. And it's just like having a musical conversation, but it's on stage and it's a conversation that we've been having since I was born. And so I always have a lot of fun when I'm trading with my dad on stage. I love doing that.
Yeah, that's fun.
Andromeda, I'd like to talk about your family. In the years since we talked about, growing up in a household with your mom and your dad and hearing this music and how integral it was for your life. And since then, you have a family of your own. You have a husband and 2 children. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Tell us about how music plays a role within your own family.
Well, my husband is not a musician. He works in IT, but my husband sang in a choir when he was growing up. And I remember when we were getting engaged, my mom was like, well, he has good pitch, so he's not going to ruin the gene pool. It's fine. My husband has, and I swear he has perfect pitch because if he starts singing a song out of thin air and then I press play on the record, he's always in the same key. So even though he's not a musician, he's not ruining the gene pool, as my mother would say. But he enjoys listening to music, and we, before the pandemic, would go to a lot of concerts together all the time. And my older daughter is 9, and she likes pop music, but she loves going to jazz, or like if I have a rehearsal or something that she can come to. And now, since the pandemic has started, she started listening to jazz on her own. And she actually really likes Charles Mingus, which I think is very interesting that's the musician that whenever that music comes on, she really gravitates towards it. And so it's really cool to see her sort of starting to show interest in jazz. And my son is not even 2 yet, but he likes Latin jazz. He'll just start thrailing around and dancing to it, or anything that's got high energy. His probably favorite song in the whole world is Ella Fitzgerald's cover of Old MacDonald Had a Farm. He goes crazy running around the house if you put that on.
Do you think that they're going to possibly take up an instrument, or maybe, I know it's too soon to tell, but if they came to you and said, Mom, thinking about going into music as a career, how would you feel about that?
Worried for them, to be honest, because I know how difficult it can be. It's not easy being a professional musician, but I would absolutely give them all of the knowledge that I have and help them as much as I can. And open any doors for them that I might be able to open for them. But I would most certainly hope that they decide not to be musicians, just because you always want your kids to have an easy life.
So, Steve, I want to ask this question as we wind up. When you think about, all of the experiences you've had in your life, and now to look at your daughter who is having her own experiences, not only as a talented artist and also as a parent, how does that make you feel as a father when you're able to look at her and all the things that she's also achieved?
Well, I'm very proud of her, and she's just still getting started. I'm still going, I'm 72. She's just getting started, so there's still a whole world ahead for her. So, I'm very happy for her. And in terms of having your children be musicians, it's different today than when I was coming up. Now they got auto-tune and all kind of smoke and mirrors. And it's not really, to make money, even what they call in jazz and they're selling now isn't jazz the way I know it, where it's about the art form and about playing on the highest level possible. It's more about the imagery and whatever's popular and try to get the money. So I think it's more difficult now than it was when I was coming up. There were a lot more opportunities for live music when I was coming up. Now they got a DJ, replace the whole band. And somebody spinning records and they think they're a musician. We used to go to a party and someone's playing a record and you dance to it too, because nobody had money to pay a band. But Now a DJ will get as much money for that one guy as to pay a whole band of musicians. So it's different today. And so, you got to really want to do it because you love it, because it's a challenge. If you take care of the music, it will take care of you. I believe that.
Steve and Andromeda Turre, our guests during this week's In Studio from Simply Timeless. Special thanks to both of them for taking the time to chat with me, and a word of congratulations to Andromeda, who now holds the position of Vice Chair for the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Advisory Committee in Bedford, New York. Friends, until we meet again, I'm Jay Daniels, and this has been In Studio from Simply Timeless.